Welcome, Chris. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Felicia.
Yeah, well, we know that when we're talking about MTSS and implementing MTSS effectively, it really involves gathering the right data and using that data in a right way. So, to kick off the conversation, what's one based strategy or practice that you'd recommend to help schools make better decisions that aim to promote better outcomes for students?
So first and foremost, we need to be focusing on social and emotional data. So thinking about students' ways in which they are regulating, how if they are feeling safe. We know that these social emotional skills and strategies underscore their capacity to learn and make safe decisions in school. And without knowing if a student has the skills and strategies to regulate effectively and navigate their stress or their anxiety in a given situation, like if there's a test or they forgot their homework, things of that nature, as well as things like maybe not feeling safe in that classroom or in that school or in that grade at that given time. These are kind of basic social emotional areas that we can understand, and by evaluating them and knowing them meaningfully in the school setting, we can make informed decisions to help to support all of our students to thrive.
Oh, you said it so great. And today's topic really is focusing on how do we leverage that data just to strengthen what works right now in MTSS.
Mm-hmm.
Your recent meta-analysis found that the universal programs focus on skill building and student development, and those can lead to meaningful gains in student and academic achievement. What is one key insight or tip from that research you think schools should be paying more attention to?
So when we provide students with the skills and strategies to navigate their social emotional selves in classrooms, they do better academically. So it's really important for us to be able to keep those things together and not view them as kind of separate or adjacent when thinking about overall student health and wellness in school settings. And so to the best of our extent that we're able to either evaluate, monitor, or even better yet, have students self-assess where they're at socially and emotionally, this can support to drive change in helping to inform educators and the adults around them how best to support students to succeed, as well as teaching students how to be agents of change themselves in their learning, in being able to, acknowledge what they need in a given context to be able to, access that great math curriculum that the teacher's been working on.
Yeah, I love that you said let's have students self assess and then become their own agents in their learning and their success stories. I think that's one new piece and one new innovative strategy that schools are starting to find to promote that success. Another powerful finding was that when programs were delivered by classroom teachers, academic outcomes improved even more. How can schools look at that and use that kind of data to inform tier one planning and professional development?
It's a really great question. So we know across the United States in particular that most educator preparation programs do not focus on, providing explicit training to educators on how to best support social emotional instruction in their classrooms. And so investing in continuous professional development and opportunities for teachers to grow their skills and strategies to be most effective social emotional teachers in classroom settings is one evidence-based way to drive change and affect the fidelity of implementation that will happen thereafter.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm a former district administrator, and we collected a ton of student data. But what types of student data do you believe are underused when it comes to driving those tier one, tier two, and tier three supports?
Oh gosh, we could talk about this one all day. I mean, a couple of things that come to mind first. Really be mindful of what types of demographic variables are aggregated and how you're looking at those aggregates, because most of the time, sometimes differences in students' experiences, so the salience of their identity in a learning context may actually be minimized by it being aggregated into one variable. So I'll give you an example: students with an IEP or students with a 504. We all know there are so many different profiles of learning that fall into those aggregates, right? And so when thinking about and trying to make evidence-based decisions in school settings, if we say this works for students with IEPs or this is not working, we really don't know who we're talking about there. So we need to drill down further and kind of go to that lower level to think more, concretely about the learner's identity and context. And how is this, helping or supporting our neurodivergent students? How is this helping or supporting our students with specific learning disabilities? Like where and how are we helping to meet students where they're at? And we can use, because most schools have this demographic data, but it just aggregates up in a way that makes it overgeneralized, and so it underrepresents the diversity of student experience. And I think another piece is I want to just drill down on the idea that we need to ask students to report on themselves, and we need to trust what they're telling us, because most times if you work with young people, they will give you all the answers. They won't just tell you how they're feeling, but they'll also tell you how you could change it, how you can fix it, what will help them feel safe. And sometimes that's, getting to talk to that lunch monitor or their bus driver or the security guard, or right, there's so many different ways they will give you the answers if we provide the space to enable that, and then show them that we're listening. So we're making changes that reflect what it is that they're asking for.
Gosh, I wish we could coin that up, put it in a bottle, and share it to all district administrators.
Me too.
Student voice is so powerful. I think that's one piece that really impacted my teaching, was asking students, what needs to be changed in our environment for you to feel like you belong? And was some of that information groundbreaking and changed the way I interacted with students. So, I love that you said that. You have such amazing research. I know you do so much with students. Your research also highlighted the importance of how these programs are being delivered, not just what's going to be delivered. So what kind of data can help schools better understand the quality of their implementation?
It's a great question. So there's a couple of different kind of layers when we think about quality and the how of social emotional teaching, or the how of implementation science, right? And so sometimes we're talking about, was a program delivered the way it was intended? And we all know, if you're school people, that it's never delivered the way it's intended. Like the way it comes out of the box or online or in the evaluations, like the big ones that we run, right? It never actually looks like that in the school setting, right? You shrink the time down, you have different people instructing it, so things are variable and they can get a little bit muddy. And so really acknowledging kind of how far is that distance from what you said you were going to do versus like what actually happened. And hold that as a context. That's an important piece of information when thinking about, and evaluating kind of the magnitude of effects. And then the second piece is kind of understanding what it is that individual teachers or clusters of teachers are doing in their implementation practices. So how are they teaching, and how are they, using certain universal design principles and the ways in which they're engaging and meeting students, because not all programs and approaches, as well as not all teachers, have had that level of training or recognition that sometimes the things we say or do in classrooms can be unintentionally excluding certain students from participating, or excluding or limiting the access certain students have to information. Like, I give you a very concrete example. I know many teachers, myself included, I would fall into this habit of like looking for and calling for extemporaneous speech, or like going around and having kids go around the circle and share. Well, when you think about the diversity of learner profile, if you've got a child where maybe they're a multilingual learner and in kind of engaging in the content, or they are navigating anxiety in a given space, or they have experiences at home that aren't relevant to the question being asked. There's lots of different reasons why for that child, they may not be able to show up in what you and I may have been trained to think about as like a very common practice in classrooms. And so holding ourselves and kind of recognizing these pieces.
Love it. And so you've given us a lot of concrete examples, and we keep asking you for tips because you're the expert here and we love hearing from you. But for school or district leaders who want to make database decisions that centered around student growth and readiness, and not just compliance, not just checking the box, what's one shift that you would recommend?
Oh gosh, so many shifts. So first, I want to encourage to reflect upon what are the measurement tools that you're using in that moment, and were those measurement tools kind of designed for the current schooling and current climate and current students, like, and where you're at right now. I work with a lot of districts nationwide, and there's a lot of kind of old practices that are still kind of at play in settings that aren't really as meaningful as they could be to the current context of where we're at. And, what that may look like is like, they may kind of present students and show students in a certain light, maybe a deficit frame, or kind of show what they can't do in a given setting. And sometimes they may position students so that you're not seeing them as they are, you're just kind of seeing them as the tool may imagine them to be. And so really finding ways to be flexible in those settings and kind of question, well, is it always the same types of kids who are getting, kind of placed disproportionately in certain settings or learning environments in our school or in our environment? And who's being held up as best or high achieving in given circumstances? Are there any patterns there that we can establish as a team? These are some evidence-based ways to move forward. My team had a chapter come out in a book called SEL in Action that actually documents a district's journey and kind of really thinking about these measurement practices. And perhaps that could be one of many resources that folks could look into, actually across that book, of kind of different strategies and ways in which districts navigated the ways in which they were using data.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll drop that book and several other books that you recommend for schools just to really dive into to help focus on using data strategically and appropriately for student outcomes. Before we leave today, we always tell our guests we have to be reminded more than we need to be taught something. So what's a reminder that you want to leave us with today?
It's very common in education for our students to apologize for asking questions. And I want to encourage each and every one of the educators out there to hear it, recognize, and teach your students that they do not need to apologize for asking questions, that we don't need to apologize for learning or dismiss our needs in lesson. We know that inquiry is a pinnacle form of learning and that we as educators can be agents of change in helping to support students to grow the ways in which they are providing us their questions so that we can meet them where they are. I recently wrote a book that talks about this and many other strategies. It's called Be Unapologetically Impatient, and I hope that many of you will check it out.
I love that title. You're going to have to tell us before we leave today, how did you land on that title?
Well, the book is really talking about the kind of different pieces of what's going on in the apology, as well as what's going on in what's expected to be patient. And so, patient as a noun is meant someone who's suffering in a system, even though patient as a virtue is considered like the right thing to do, that somehow your needs are being met. But in education, there are many times, and many of us in education are kind of told to wait as a part of the function of the system, that somehow things will be better thereafter, when really, especially for our kiddos with disabilities and kind of complex needs, it's anything but that. So I break down these types of strategies, as well as the ways in which we can really begin to make effective change in our school environments, one interaction at a time, by what you say and how you say it. So all the evidence-based strategies, my research, come out in the book for teachers, educators, support staff, parents, families, and leaders.
So powerful. We can't wait to get on that book. We're going to link it there for all of our guests today. Dr. Cipriano, we appreciate you spending some time with us. We wish we could have you for hours on end. We had to make it short for this summit, but thank you for joining us and Character Strong.
Thank you so much for having me.